Let me first tell you that I first found out about Tami Hoag maybe, 15 years ago when I was looking for something good to read, and I wandered into Barnes & Noble down on Ventura Boulevard here, and one of the booksellers I said, what are you looking for? I said, I need a good mystery book. She says, follow me. So she took me over to the mystery section, and there is, and Tami, I don't know if you know, there's a 5-foot shelf of your books. And I thought, who is this woman? I need to know who she is. So I picked up her first book, A Thin Dark Line, which is set in Louisiana. And let me tell you, this author pulls no punches. She's fabulous. She has strong female characters who are spot on with dialogue. She doesn't mess around. She's a woman who knows how to handle a gun, a long gun. She studied forensic psychology. She studied martial arts. And she's learned to drive a police car in pursuit of the bad guys. So, she's the real thing. And if there's anything I love better than a good mystery, it's a horse. So let me tell you what else I had in common with this woman. I've owned horses, and all my life, I'm a wannabe rider. She's the real thing. She is a Grand Prix dressage rider. She has had horses both in Florida and been in the circuit, both in Florida and in Los Angeles. And when I first saw Tami in the ring, and I was talking to her about this earlier, it was down in Orange County, maybe 10 years ago or something. And I don't know, anybody go to horse shows or watch dressage? I mean, it's a fabulous sport, and it is a sport. And that rider has to be as fit as the horse, and it is a communication between the horse and rider. I saw her come into the arena, and she comes in, and that horse comes in, and he is breathing fire. And she pulls him up and collects him, and it was just a thing of beauty to watch her go through the paces, because he pee-offed, and he trotted, and he walked, and I had tears in my eyes. She is a woman of many talents. She's the #1 international bestseller author of more than 50 books, 30 books in 30 different languages. She's been on the New York Times bestselling list time and time again. And friends, I can't tell you how proud I am today to introduce you to Tami Hoag. Tami, come on up here.
Not as athletic as I used to be. I thought, I've been in this business a long time, and I should probably talk about my journey and all the things that have transpired and how the business has changed since I got into it. I started out my career in 1987, sold my first book in 1987, came out in 1988. And I started my career in romance. I started my career actually writing romantic comedy. And now people like romantic comedy, murder. That seems like a big leap. Like, as the veteran of several relationships, I am here to say, no, it really isn't. It's really not at all. It's kind of a natural progression. So yeah, I started out in romantic comedy, and I did that very deliberately. I knew I wanted to write. That was where I wanted to break in, was in romance, and I'm looking at the landscape there, and I'm like, I can write comedy. Not a lot of people can pull that off. So that is going to be my foot in the door. And I targeted a publisher, targeted a line of romance that was known for giving their authors a lot of leeway. So if I came in writing romantic comedy, they weren't going to expect me to do that every single time out. I had free reign to roam within the genre. So I could write a comedy, and then I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll dabble in, I want this one to be more like an old Western, but contemporary, or, then I started kind of playing with elements of suspense, and the longer I lived, the darker I became. And eventually, I got to a point where I started out in category romance, so those books come out every month. They live for a month and they're gone. So you have to be prolific to make a living doing that. And I knew I wanted to move on to a standalone book. And I sat, I'm thinking, well, what is it going to be? What do I want to write about? And I couldn't think of anything funny that would sustain a full-length novel. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not coming up with anything. And every idea I had started with a dead body. I thought, well, that's the direction. That's the direction I'll go in then. We'll go with the dead body. And at the start of that, when I'm talking to my agent, I'm talking to my editor, and they're like, well, is it going to be, what is it you want to do? Is it like this writer? Is it like that writer? And I'd be like, well, kind of, but not really. And what I really wanted to do was a hybrid of romance and suspense that would be really kind of a 50-50 blend of the two. And that wasn't a thing that anyone was doing at the time. Lucky for me, I had people who trusted me to take a stab at that, and the rest is history. So for a while there, I was writing books that were, the structure of it would be as the romance was ramping up, the suspense would be in a little bit of a lull. As the suspense plot was coming up, then they'd have a little bit of a lull in the romance. So there was this constant blend of the two. And I did that for several books, and then I wanted to do a straight up suspense novel. But my publisher was like, oh, we think it's too soon. We like what you're doing, we think it's too soon. This is a risk, this is that. And I'm like, what are you gonna do? They're the ones who write the check, So I'm like, okay, well, I have this idea, the book that turned out to be Night Sins. I said, I have this idea, it's a two-parter. In the first book, the crime is committed, and the second book is prosecuted. And they're like, yeah, but it really should be more romance. You have to keep the romance going in that. And I'm like, okay. So I write the book the way they asked me to. I turn it in, and they're like, this is too romancy. This is a suspense novel. What are you thinking, having all this romance in it? And I'm like, okay, 4-year-old children who run publishing, send it back to me. I'll fix it, I wrote that book, I swear to God, I wrote that book in entirety like 3 times before everybody was like, yeah, that's exactly what it was supposed to be. I'm like, yeah, exactly what it was supposed to be the first time I wrote it. So that was a strange experience, but it all worked out well, and that set me on the path to writing suspense. And I would say I just kind of crossed over to the dark side and stayed there. And that's where I live now. And that's, just like everything else, like the plot in my own life, as the romance plot goes down and down and down, the suspense plot goes up and up and up. And, I love what I do now, and I don't see going back. I like doing the dark stuff. It's funny, during COVID, I talked to a lot of writer friends, and some went in one direction, some went in the other. And, I've got one friend who's like, I can't do anything dark now. It was such a dark time. It was such a heavy, she's like, I can't bear it. We've been just through so much, and so much of it is dark, and I just want to laugh. And I am the total opposite. And I'm like, you think you're going to make me laugh during all of this? Good luck. You better be really funny, because that is not gonna fly with me. I'm just gonna be stone-faced through that. So that's how I ended up where I ended up, But such a long, when I look back, the 80s, it doesn't seem that long ago. But there are probably people in this room who were like maybe just born. So like really, what is that now? 40 years ago, 30, 35? It's like, yeah, there are people who weren't born when I wrote my first book. I wrote my first book longhand, and then I typed it, and I had a cheap little electric typewriter that had, I thought this was very cool when I bought it. It had cartridges, ribbon cartridges. You had the black cartridge, and then you had a correction cartridge. So it was like whiteout on a cartridge. And I was so paranoid typing that book out, because I thought, oh God, if I have a typo, they won't buy it. I was so nervous about it. It had to be perfect. I gave myself carpal tunnel, putting the cartridge in and out. And thank God I sold that book. And then I took my advance and bought my first computer, which was, it was like, the screen was like this big, black and white, and the whole thing was like this huge thing. And I knew nothing about computers, because I'm 20-some years old. They didn't have, there was no such thing when I was in school, so nobody taught us how to use computers. So then here's a computer. Well, I happened to be, at the time, I was married to a computer programmer, which you might think was a good thing. It was not a good thing. And so we go out, we buy this computer, and well, okay, you got to teach me how to use this thing. Then we sit down, and he takes that very literally and starts, I make this offhand remark about, I don't even know how this thing works. So he proceeds to start to explain to me how a computer works, and how, you have zero, and I'm like, that was a rhetorical question. It was a rhetorical remark. I do not want to know how a computer works. Just show me what to do with it. So I was talking to somebody earlier, it was like, we had to just fend for ourselves. We had to just figure it out and fend for ourselves. And that was not a good plan, really, because like to this day, now it's so much easier. Everything is computers are a lot easier to deal with. But I still, when I hit a snag, I have no idea why. I have no idea what to do about it. And all of that always happens when I'm on deadline or in revisions. And, the editor will be like, oh, well, all you do is, you go on this program and you do that. And I'm like, you lost me. You've already lost me. I don't know what you're talking about. I still don't know. I was doing something with the when I was turning in Bad Liar, and they sent me some version of it. Oh, you just need to make your changes in this other program. I couldn't figure out how to get that thing on my computer, and I'm like, look, I'm doing it this way, and y'all can figure it out. You have whole departments of 20-something-year-old people who know how to do that. That's what you pay them for. So I can do one thing really well, and that's what I'm doing. And the rest, you got to figure the rest of that out. So such a long, strange journey, and the business is so different now from what it, when I broke in. When I broke in, we had the big 5 publishers, and that was those were basically the only games in town. And now there's all these different options and ebooks and self-publishing and all this other stuff. I had somebody ask me at a signing recently. They wanted, like, oh, how do I want to be a writer, how do I go about it? And I said, you go on Google and you Google, how do I become a published author? Because I don't even know what to tell you at this point. It's so different from what it was then. And it's just, we just go along for the ride, and we have to learn by doing. I was in 4-H when I was a kid. That was our motto, you learn by doing. So during the course of that, so I'm writing along, and it was probably a Thin Dark Line was my 3rd suspense novel. And, coming up in romance, you don't write a series in the same way that you do in mystery. In romance, you've got your writing book, you've got your protagonists. You can put them through the tortures of the damned through the course of that book, but by the end of it, you have to have resolved all their major issues. You give them their happy ending. You do not ever, ever come back and put them through something else again. Readers will hunt you down in the street if you do that. I knew Sandra Brown was, when she first started out, she had written a book, Everybody loved it. Everybody loved the hero and the heroine. She decided to write a sequel, and she killed off I can't remember. I think it was the guy. I don't really remember, but that's like 100 years ago now. But oh my God! I mean, it really was a mortal sin to do that, and the backlash was horrific. And she's the sweetest person in the world. And she's like, I had no idea. I didn't know. She did not know the rules. And so you don't do that. In romance, you'll write that book, and then you'll spin off secondary characters. So maybe it's the heroine's sister or the hero's best friend or whatever like that. And you might write, 3 or 4 novels spinning characters off. And that's how you do a series in romance. In suspense, of course, we can stay with the same characters over and over and over, so I had never done that, and I didn't kind of have that mindset. But when I wrote A Thin Dark Line, I got to the end of the book, and I thought, I'm enjoying these characters a lot. I love the setting, and I think maybe I want to write another book with them, because now I'm free to do that. And so I'm talking to my editor, and I tell her this, and she's like, oh, don't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, she came up in romance with me, so she didn't have that mindset either. And she's like, oh, I don't know, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, maybe it's not quite the right time to do a series, or maybe it's going to look, maybe it's not going to look as big if you do it as a series. And, she had like 100 reasons not to write a series. And in the end, what am I going to do? She's the one who's tells him to sign my check. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll come up with something else. I don't have anything else. And I sat around and I came up with another idea, which ironically became a book that started a series. But, time is going by, and I'm like, so I left those characters from A Thin Dark Line. And I thought about them a lot, but I never thought I was going to go back to them, because I had sort of not been given permission to do that. I sort of had this rule, and she said don't do that, so I'm not going to do that. And so years go by, but I keep hearing from readers, and they're like, are you ever going to write about Nick and Annie again? And I mean, a lot of years are going by, and I'm still getting this question. So I'm sitting around, and now I had changed publishers. The new publisher, we didn't have that history. Nobody had that conversation with me. They didn't have any objection to me doing it. And so I came up with the idea for The Boy. I thought, I'm going to bring these characters back. And it was good, and but I thought it was going to be, oh, great, it's Nick and Annie. I'm just going to move them, because through the magic of fiction, I don't have to age them in real time, because now it's like 25 years later. They're all going to, no, we're not going to do that. Like, I'm going to bring them forward about 5 or 6 years in their relationship, and start there. And I thought, I know these people, we'll just jump back in. They're married now, they have a child, things are great. And then I went to write the first scene with Annie, and it was not great, because she was quite clearly miffed with her husband. They were arguing about something. I'm like, no. I don't have time for this. You do not get to be not getting along. This was not part of my vision. Now, I don't write from an outline, so I hadn't sat down and said this, and this is going to happen, because that doesn't work for me. So, for me, I know the setup. I know the crime that kicks everything off. I know, some of the main characters. I don't know them all. I'll meet a lot of people along the way and be like, well, who are you and why are you here? And they'll reveal that to me in the fullness of time. And, but yeah, so I had not foreseen that they weren't getting along. And I tried to write around that. I tried to force it this way and that way. And I was like, no, this is just plainly how it is. They are in a space in their relationship where they have got like one wheel has come off the track, and they don't know quite how to get it back on. And so I ended up just going with that. And it worked out. It was like, okay, I see why it had to be that way, as I got into it and everything. But so I write The Boy, And I'm getting towards deadline on that. It's probably in the last quarter of the book. And my mother passed away unexpectedly. And I had to just stop and go back. I'm from Minnesota. I had to go back to Minnesota to deal with everything that entails. But when I came home, I was gone about, I don't know, maybe I was gone a week. And I came home and I thought, I don't have time now. I've got a deadline. I'm already behind. I've got to get this book written. I don't have time to sit down and digest what's just happened. I just got to finish the book. I'll finish the book and then I'll be able to take a deep breath and think about all of that. So I finished the book, turned the book in, I'm ready to take my big deep breath, and the Woolsey fire happens. I have to evacuate. Threw a bunch of stuff in a suitcase, grabbed my dog, off we went, and ended up, y'all know how this goes. You keep going to hotels until you find one that hasn't filled up already. And I ended up in a little Holiday Inn Express down by the LAX. And I'm sitting there in the middle of the night watching the news coverage, and they're showing a house that's fully engulfed in flames, and it's my next door neighbor. And I know this because the house had these kind of peculiar shaped chimneys. And then they're saying we're in Westlake Village, blah, blah, blah. And there's this house that's on fire. And I'm like, what about the house next door? Is that on fire? Because that's my house. And they're not saying anything about it. They're showing they're showing the fire truck up on the road, and they're saying absolutely nothing about the house next door. And I'm thinking, it's gone. It must be gone, or they'd be saying something. And so it was, about hours and hours later, I find out my house was still standing. My neighbor's house was burned to the ground. And when I was finally allowed to go back to my house, the smoke damage was horrific. It was just, I can't even describe the smell of that and it was just toxic and horrible. And I called my heating and AC people out to go up in the attic and see what was the deal up there. So obviously we're gonna have to rip out all the insulation and whatnot. And he comes downstairs, and on the end of the house next to my neighbor's house, he found a charred ember about this big that had come in through a vent, and it had landed on the metal drain pan of the unit in the attic. If it had landed inches in another direction, I wouldn't have had a house. But the house was there, and it took, I was out of my house for 7 months while we did the restoration and all of that. And it just seemed to take forever. And during that time, my oldest brother passed away. Not unexpectedly, he'd been ill for quite a long time. And, so that was not a surprise, but I'm like, okay, well, here we go again. And then it just became like the trials of Job after that. It was like my other brother had cancer. My sister got diagnosed with ALS. It was just on and on and on. And then we had COVID, and it was, it was just like one thing after the next. And then my other brother passed away. And about 6 or 8 weeks after he passed away, my sister passed away from COVID. So it was just like bam, 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 one thing after another. And my editor called me after my sister passed, and she said, yeah, this is too much. She said, we totally, we're watching all this happen. If you need to take some time, do whatever you have to do. And when you're ready to come back, we're here. Which was such a huge support, and a relief to me, because I'm like, yeah, I think I need to just step back. I think I need to just step back for a while and kind of reset. I need to reboot. So that's what I did. I stepped back, and I thought, here's what I'm going to do. We were still in, nobody was going anywhere, nobody was doing anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up every day and breathe in and out, and I'm going to take up gardening. And I would go outside and I would garden I would work in the yard like a field hand. And then I would come in and I'm like, I'm going to take up cooking. Everything was to be just very deliberate and in the moment. And quite a lot of time went by without me kind of realizing it. But that was what I really needed to do, that reset. I could not write through that. I just couldn't. I write, everybody's different. Everybody writes from a different place inside them. And, some people can be very detached from it and very, here's my plan, here's what I'm doing. I write from a really emotional place. So when you're in the midst of stuff like that, that's not happening. It's just not going to happen. Or if I try to write through that, I'll write, 100 pages of garbage and throw it away and then berate myself for being a failure. And, so it was just really necessary to stop for a while. So time went by. And when I came back, I wanted to go back to Nick and Annie and write another book about Nick and Annie. But so it became this sort of weirdly accidental series, because here's this book, and then, honest to God, 25 years before I wrote the second book in the series. And then there was this break of a few years, and then now the third book in the series. Now I'm starting work on the fourth book, so fingers crossed that I get to just sit down and write it and not have all these weird, crazy life experiences that sideline me from doing that. But that's how I ended up writing a series, not the normal way, for sure. And I know I'm going to write at least 2 more books about Nick and Annie, and then we'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of still not of the right mindset to be the person who writes a really, bang, bang every year, here's a book from this series. It's just kind of not, I think I lack the discipline necessary to do that. And I get very, I get restless, I'm like, yeah, love these people, sick of their problems. I want to go to a different location and deal with the problems of people I've never met. And I'll do that for a while, and then I'll come back to this. So I'm not, it's not terrifically commercial to think that way. But that's just never been me, I've never been a person who, like, okay, here's the trend, here's forensics are hot right now, I'm going to write a series about forensics, and it just doesn't work that way for me. I would sit down and go, well, I have nothing to say, I have to have something to say. And so that's my accidental series. So getting ready to start work on the fourth book. So thought I would be well into the fourth book by now, but turns out, I'd gone through a long period where I was like always kind of behind, and everything was rushed and crashed, and there was not lots of time to plan the publication of a book. They'd just be like, here it is, get it out, and it was like, I don't have time to tour, I need to get back to work, and blah, blah, blah. And this time they're like, no, we're doing this the right way. We're going to do this properly, and we're going to have a whole plan. And now we have social media, which was not a big thing before. And I don't know that much about how to do all that stuff, So I for ages complain about, like, well, you do it. Why should I do it? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do, I can't do TikTok, for God's sake. I can do Facebook. I can manage Facebook. Above that, I just, no, I'm lost, And so they kind of kept on. My argument is always, you have people who know how to do this. You have a marketing department, make them do it. And they always throw it back at the writer. I'm like, oh. So I finally went out and I hired a social media person to do it for me. And I thought, oh, that takes all of that off me, and now I can sit down and just work. Not true. Because then they're calling you up and they're like, yeah, that's great. She's doing a great job, but we need more. Can you make a video? Can you make a video about this? Can you make a video about, can you do a promo for this, that, and the next thing? I'm like, I can, but here's what that involves. They're like, it's just like 2 minutes. It's just 2 minutes. Yeah, well, to make that, it's a lot more than 2 minutes, and I'm going to be fussy and perfectionistic about it. And I'm like, oh, I've got to do my hair, and I've got to do my makeup, and I have to pick something to wear. And then you sit down, and then I'm going to have to record it like 50 times before I get the one that's perfect. So there goes half a day doing that, So all of that stuff still ate up just a ton of time. And I resent every minute of that. But now finally getting back to work on book number 4. So that's kind of my journey. I think I'm always better off asking you all what you want to know, and going from there. Oh, yeah, right here.
Like you, I don't know anything about social media. I don't even have Facebook. But I am willing to hire somebody who knows something about it, and I'm right now just working through some of the parameters of what her job description would be. When you talk social media, are you talking a blog?
No, I don't blog. I'm not a blogger. I don't do a newsletter. They would love it if I did all of those things, but I'm like, yeah, no, I don't see doing that. I don't know. Maybe I will now that I have somebody else to deal with actually getting it up and putting it wherever it's supposed to be put. I don't know how any of that stuff works. So. So we do Facebook and Instagram are the 2 main ones. Yeah, really didn't go down into the Twitterverse or whatever they call it now. Because they're looking at where I already had audience, where I already had followers, and those were the 2 that made sense.
Okay. And when you do start a series and you have 4 of these series, how much backstory do you go into to set up your characters if, say, someone did not read the first book?
Yeah, I write them each as standalone books entirely. Absolutely. So no one ever comes in feeling like they're walking into the middle of a conversation. I don't want a reader to feel like clearly I've missed something here. So there has to be a certain amount of backstory to set up, their relationship, how their relationship works. In the first book, Nick is a detective for the sheriff's office, Annie is a deputy. And at the end of that book, she ends up getting moved into the detective division. And so he's her boss. Now he's the detective lieutenant in charge of that. And he is now her boss. So there's a certain amount of just trying to give a basic setup and not go too much into detail. You don't want to bog people down with, if they love this book, they'll go back and read the first book, and I'm like, oh, that's what, There's like mention of Annie. Annie has an unusual background in that her mother came to that town pregnant. She doesn't know who her father is. She was raised by a couple that took her mom in. So there's always going to be a little bit about that because that's so much a part of who she is. So that gets knitted in. But yeah, I write each book as a standalone.
I wanted to ask you how you felt about deadlines. I know that most people who are traditionally published have them. Do they help you concentrate and force you to be disciplined, or do you find them really annoying and stressful?
Yes. Both. Yes, it's definitely necessary. It's definitely necessary. And I try my best to let them to keep that deadline and try to stay disciplined about it. But yeah, it's stressful and it's annoying, and it's, it doesn't account for real life happens. I say real life intervenes, and hopefully you're working with people who are understanding about that. One of my stories from when I was a baby writer, I had a friend who lost her husband to cancer. He had a 5-year battle with kidney cancer, and passed away. And she was on deadline when he passed away. And her editor was my editor at the time. And that editor called her the week after the funeral to express her condolences and to remind her that she had a deadline and that work would be her salvation. So, yeah, it all depends on who you're working with. That I never ever forgot that. That was just like, ooh, branded in my brain. I'm like, okay, now I know who I'm dealing with. And yeah, that was a very different experience from my current situation, where they were very, very understanding of that. But yes,
Tami, I was reading a scene in one of your books where you were doing there was a physical combat going on. And I was curious about your background in martial arts. Was this helpful in how you positioned the scene and saw the scene? I mean, it was you brought to the page, you painted a picture for me, and I absolutely saw it in my mind.
yeah, I started working out with a guy who was a mixed martial arts fighter. I had known nothing about it before I met him. And so I met him, and I knew part of the workout was boxing and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, that'll be great exercise. Everybody says that's great exercise. And we worked together for a couple of weeks, and he goes, you should probably watch a fight because I think you might like it. And there happened to be a fight card on TV that weekend, and I sat down and watched it, and I loved it. I didn't just like it. I'm like, where has this been all my life? And yeah, I really got into it. And at that time, there were very few women involved in the. They weren't allowed. They had not been allowed yet into the UFC, and over the next few years they were. But I really, really got into it. And so, yeah, when I write a fight scene in a book, I literally choreograph it like a dance. Yes. So, good thing where I live in a very isolated place, so my neighbors aren't looking in the windows going, what the hell is she doing now? Because I get up, oh, now I'm this person, and he's going to throw this punch, and this is going to happen, and then I have to be the other person, and then I literally block it out and choreograph it like a dance. Yeah.
It sounds like you're a bit of a pantser versus a plotter, and I was curious, when you get through a draft, do you ever find yourself writing yourself into a corner, and what's your rewrite process like?
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely a pantser. Like I said, I start out, I know the crime that's central to the story. I may or may not know who did it. I may think I know who did it. Sometimes I'll go in with an agenda, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be the guy, and I'm going to get him. And then during the course of writing the book, well, now I know that's going to happen, so maybe everyone will know that's going to happen. I'm not bored with that idea, but here's this other person who came in. I don't even know where they came from. Maybe they did it. What's their thing, And so that can change a lot during I might change my mind 10 times before I get to the end of the book. The end of this book, I was literally, almost the end of the book, I was trying to figure out a way to undead a guy that was dead from the very beginning of the book. I'm like, oh God, does he have to be dead? Really? Because I never said it was him, because there's some way I could make him not be dead, and there wasn't, as it turned out. But a lot of things will change. So, but I write, so my daily grind is I sit down, I read what I wrote the day before, and I tinker and fuss and rewrite and tinker and fuss and rewrite. And then I'll get to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I'll write new material. And I come back the next day and do so. I edit as I go, which a million people will tell you don't do that. But that's what works for me. And for me, when I get to the end of the book, it's done.
Wow.
I rarely go back and change much of anything. It just it has just unfolded in a way that's organic and in a logical, to me, a logical way. And when I get to the end, it's the end. When I wrote A Thin Dark Line, interestingly enough, I was probably almost to the final quarter of the book, I would say, to where, it's like, yeah, you gotta get things, you gotta start wrapping things up here and reveal who did what and everything. And I didn't know. I still didn't know who did it. And I'm like, oh, what have I done? And I thought, I've put myself in a corner now. And I sent the manuscript off to New York, and that was when you still had to print it out. That was before email, before the internet, when we wrote on stone tablets with chisels. And I turned it in, and I said, hey, I'm just gonna, I just want to see how y'all react to this story, and I want read it up to that point, and you tell me who you think did it. Now, they all thought I knew who did it, and that they were just trying, they were just supposed to try to figure it out, and I didn't know who did it, and or why actually, and so my editor calls me, and she's like, well, first I thought it was this person, and then I thought it was this person, and then I thought, oh my God, only Tami would be twisted enough for it to be this person. And I was like, wow, I never even thought of that person. That's who did it. and I thought, this is the time that I'm going to have to rewrite a ton of book, because if I didn't know this was the actual suspect, I probably have a lot of work to do. I've got to go back and lay all the groundwork, and I've got to lay all the red herrings, and blah, 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 blah. And I went back and I read it and I'm like, it's all there. It was all there. I changed almost nothing, so it was that's just a little bit of the magic of it, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you ever confess that you didn't know?
No. No, I let them think I was a genius. It's like, nah, they don't need to know that. They'll know now because they'll watch this online. They'll watch this on YouTube and go, oh my God. We got one here.
Your writing process really resonates with me. I came to your books through horses because I used to own some crazy thoroughbreds with the dressage and the jumping and everything. And you are fearless. You are fearless as a writer and a writer. You own horses, and that most people would be like, I don't think so, and you become a Grand Prix champion, and your writing is fearless as well. And I really want to know, are you going to do any more books with horses in them?
Oh, I get asked that a lot because I had two books that I set in South Florida on the horse show circuit. For those of you who don't know, South Florida is the Mecca for horse showing, and the circuit runs all winter for hunters and jumpers and for dressage, and people go down there for 6 months at a time. You live like a gypsy. You load up your trailer and pack up everything, and you move to Florida for 6 months. And it is a world like no other. It is quite amazing. So I did 2 books set in that world with a Carrie, and then I haven't gone back to her, but she was a really interesting character to write because she's so messed up. Yeah. She is so screwed up, and those are the most fun characters, obviously, to write. So I don't know. I'm not going to say never. She still lives back here, and I am probably not done with her. There's again my very non-commercial way to write books, because now it's been 20 some years probably since I wrote about Elena Estes, but I may come back to her yet. I kind of left her life in an uncertain spot, so.
No. Can I ask you, because your process really, like I said, resonates with me, but you churn out so many books. Like how many books do you tend to, because I know when I'm overwhelmed, I can't write, and I might take a long time off, but you're amazing. You just keep writing so many. How many do you write in a year?
Well, now I don't. I mean, when I started, when I started in category romance, I would write, and those are like, what are they, 75,000 words or so. And if you want to make a living at that, you have to keep doing it. So, I would write 4 in a year. So that's a lot. And then when I went to standalone books, I was still kind of like, oh, I better keep my nose on the grindstone. And so I was writing a big, fat romantic suspense about every 9 months. So there was a lot like bam, 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 that those came out, and that just about killed me. It was too much. It was just too much. Then the pendulum kind of swung the other way, where I'm like, you know what, I also need to have a life. And, so now I'm trying to get back on, I'd like to be doing a book a year or a book every 18 months. But more than that is too much. And that was also, another thing that happened in the business in the last decade or so, where all of a sudden, publishing is a very frantic and fear-driven business. And all of a sudden we had them saying, oh, you have to do 2 books a year. Yeah, everybody has to write 2 books a year. 2 books a year. And I'm in, big name authors are like, yeah, you have to write 2 books a year. And I'm like, I can't even say what I said to that, because it was a naughty word. Like, no, I'm not doing that. And the world kept turning, like, I'm not going to do that. The quality of my work is going to suffer. The quality of my life is going to suffer. I'm going to do it this way, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, I don't know. I have no other skills. So I don't know what would happen to me, but that's kind of, Now I want to get a little more regular, because everything just, my life just went crazy there for a while, and but I'd like to get into about a book every 18 months or so would be comfortable.
Thank you.
Sounds like your process is very organic, that you write as a pantser. And I wanted to know, how much of a role do beta readers and your editor play? Because you said you get to the end of the book and you don't have to change a thing because you've been rewriting through that whole, and so now you've stayed really true to your process. What about someone else's opinion at that point? And does it play, or is it strictly just your editor?
I am, I've never been a person who had like a writing partner or a critique group or anything like that. I went one time when I was, long before I was published, I took a class, like a community ed writing class, and it kind of functioned as a critique group because the guy that was teaching the class was lazy and didn't really want to do anything. And so he kind of turned it into a critique group. And I just sort of sat back and watched that process, and I'm like, this is not for me. Because here's Joe Schmo telling, Susie, whoever, he doesn't like this paragraph on page 6 and goes into great detail about how, I'm like, who gives a crap what you think about that? It was like, no. Are you going to write her a check for this book? No, you're not. So I don't care what you think. That's basically my attitude. The person who is going to pay me to write this book is the person whose opinion matters. So I don't have, and I, also in school, I was the person who was like this. You're not looking at my work. You'll see it when it's done. So for me, my agent sees it, my editor sees it. Those are the only two people who see it as I'm, and I got into doing this quite a long time ago where, I'll write like 150 pages, 200 pages, and I'll let them see that. So if I were taking some weird wrong turn, it would get caught for sure. So we don't have that looming over the whole thing, so they can say yay or nay, we like this, we don't like that. They rarely say anything. about it, and that's how we go on. Now on the other side of that, I have a friend I have two friends who have been critique partners forever, and that is what they swear by. That is what works for them. They are draft writers. They are real straight up draft writers. First draft, then really rough first draft, just getting the structure of the story and whatever, and then they go back and flesh things out on the second draft. And so it's a different process for them, and they swear by having their critique partners. And if that's what works for you, absolutely do that. That would just never work for me. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just speaking commercially, and in your opinion, so what's hot in terms of subject matter, genre? What's hot in the market?
What's hot in the marketplace? I have no idea. I really don't. I don't have a clue. I kind of just am living in my own head and trying to get my own work done, so I'm not really very aware of what's going on elsewhere. So that, which is for me, that's a good thing, because it's not going to distract me. This is what I do. I mind my own business and I do my own thing. And if something suddenly becomes wildly popular, I discover these things, like, oh, would you give a blurb to this book or that book, then I find out what's hot. And then I'm like, well, who knew? Someone had no idea, and a lot of the things that become popular are just not interesting to me, like we've gone through this long period of the unreliable narrator, and where every single character is so loathsome, you just want them to get on a bus and drive off a cliff. I'm like, okay, that doesn't speak to me. I'm still from the the Kurt Vonnegut school of you have to give your readers somebody to root for. So that's what I do, But obviously, the other thing is super popular. It's just not going to be something that I do, I need a moral center. I need that's what I need. So, and then somebody told me domestic mysteries are the thing. Now, I don't know. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? I don't know. I write police procedurals. That's just that's my thing. So I guess domestic mysteries are not police procedurals. I don't know. Yes, I guess like a cozy, or a cozy with lots of gore. I have no idea. No idea. Murder, She Wrote was kind of a cozy. Yeah, for sure. Murder, She Wrote was a cozy. Yeah, for sure. With a really high body count. I always thought they should, in the final episode, reveal that Jessica was a serial killer. That was where my mind went. So, anybody else? Yes.
You talked about writing from an emotional place, and I was wondering, because I feel like, as novel takes some time to write, and maybe midway through, you're in a different emotional world than when you started the book. And do you have ways of returning to the emotions that kind of gave rise to a project, or do you let life and the feelings kind of come into the book?
Well, I'm fortunate in that I live a very isolated life. So I don't have a lot of things intruding. I'm single. I'm happy to be single. I don't have drama going on that way. I live with 2 Cocker Spaniels. They don't give me a big hard time. So I can pretty much stay in the mindset of the book. And every time I go back to the book, it just sucks me into that place. But, I often wish I was a more technical, had a more detached and technical way of going about it, because I think it would be less exhausting. When I got to the end of Bad Liar, I knew what had to happen in the very, very end of the book. And I had just been through so much with these people, I couldn't do it. I can't write this scene. It's gonna kill me. I can't do it. And I called my editor and I said, I'm sending you an ending. because, you know, technically it was due. And I was like, I'm sending you an ending. It is not the ending, because I just can't go there. I need a few days. I need a few days to step back, and then I can come back and write this very, very emotional scene. It's very taxing to do it that way. Yeah. Yes.
I'll stand here. Your fearlessness inspires us, both as a writer, and also I'm really hearing you trust your gut instinct a great deal in a very noisy world that loves to drive people according to their point of view, whoever that may be. So I'd like to hear from you, what has been your toughest learning curve, or curves, that's plural, either in your creative work or in your marketing, because marketing is also a creative entity, especially for writers these days. So we're listening. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, my learning curve in that probably, well, I think probably the biggest, most important lesson was to do just that, was to trust my own instincts and to stick to it. It's like, this is who I am, this is what I do. And just trust that that was going to get me where I needed to go, you know. And then, I mean, so much of it is you write a book. That's one experience. You send the book out into the universe, and it has its own experience. And there's not, I don't feel like there's a lot I can do once that book has left my house. I have sent my child out into the world, and they have to find a way to make it, and you know, then it's dependent on the grace of readers, you know, that it has to resonate with people and they have to like it, and I've just been very fortunate that they do, you know, and what I would do about that if they didn't, I've not had to cross that bridge, thank goodness. But yeah, I think it's super important that you stick to who you are, you know, you be really true to who you are as an artist. Because, you know, I've watched other friends go through things where they're getting yanked in all these different directions. You know, well, maybe you should do this or maybe you should do that. And I'm like, and it is so, it's destructive to them artistically, you know, because they're trying to force things. They're trying to just like, oh, well, I better fit into this spot, but maybe that's not really where they belong, and it's not where their heart is. And, you know, I think it's just, you know, at the end of the day, I've been in this business for 35, 40 years now. That's a long road, and I'm still who I am, so.
Yes. I wanted to know how you work with your editor. Do you send her pages and she gets back to you and says, change this, and do you say no?
Yeah, how do I work with my editor? What's our process? I love my editor now. She's got a very deft hand, and she's very diplomatic. She's very supportive. You know, you got to get with the right person. And I'm lucky enough to be with a really, really good person. So yeah, I'll write. You know, I'll write a chunk of the book and turn it in, and she reads it, and she's just way more diplomatic than I am. Diplomacy is not my strong suit. And, you know, she'll be like, well, I just have a question about, you know, or could I know a little more about this or that? You know, she's very, very, chooses her words very carefully. You know, and sometimes I'll be like, well, you know, this will be revealed later. You know, it's going to make sense. This might not make sense. It might really make sense later. And so it's just it's very cordial. It's a very cordial relationship. Yeah, and then I'll write another chunk and send it in and see where they're, you know, what they're thinking, and that works well, because, you know, what if I've missed something, or if, you know, I wrote it in my head, but I didn't actually get it on the page or something like that, you know, like, well, what about this? Like, oh, well, I forgot to tell you that, or whatever, so, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tami. I want to